TAM TUK by George Adams. Continued. Chapter 2. Stanley that afternoon was basking in what might have been idyllic South China Sea sunshine if it had not been for the bank of smog moving towards it with impressive zeal across the water from half-visible mainland islands glowering in the distance. The traders had claimed yet another decimetre of Stanley's reasonably clean pavements and alleyways to display their silk handbags, pashmina shawls, polyester ties, fridge magnets, oversized T-shirts, marble globes, chemical hand warmers, and cards with your name in Chinese handcrafted for all to see. Tired retirees from America had waddled down from the air-conditioned tourist buses and were sucking on their first Häagen-Dazs cone of the day, or perhaps their second. Feral Australian children were attempting to blind each other with laser pointers, or poking each other with folding walking sticks, and Mummy was selecting an embroidered silk jacket for the pooch at home. Delifrance was proposing a new type of baguette made with canned peaches, Canadian bacon, and crabstick mayonnaise. Watson's the chemist was offering family packs of real Swiss reject chocolate and wasabi-flavoured corn snacks. The fruit stall at the crossroads was still warning people not to photograph the fruit. The Bauhaus colossus of the library come sports centre come garbage disposal hub was closed to visitors because today was a Thursday and people didn't read or exercise or take out their garbage on a Thursday. Along the seafront, fish and chips and a pint of frothy cold stuff was still to be had for only 150 Hong Kong dollars, but you had to sit downstairs because upstairs was already set for candlelight dinner at 800 for two, box wine excluded. Stanley, my beloved home. The epicene little man in the lane below my flat, who traded goods from the side of a wall he had usurped from another hawker, had greeted me with his usual barrage of Cantonese insults for having the temerity to be seen with a varied selection of attractive local girls in broad daylight the past 2 years. His tribe of semi-criminal friends was gathered around an enthusiastic game of cards. No money actually lay on the table, yet each player's monthly wages hung in the air so thickly you could almost touch them. The slavering, demented son of the tired old lady had said good morning as he always did, although it was now getting on for mid-afternoon. The twins, who sold their father's Turner Goes Oriental seriography, were playing some inane game on their new Samsungs. Stanley, my beloved home. I approached the low bungalow of the Southern District Kaifeng Family Advancement Association building. Inside, by a dim yellowish light, a few old men were skimming through the newspapers, looking for the latest hot racing tip, or perhaps they were digesting the political commentaries. The building was hung with a few gaudy election posters. The cooks from the Thai restaurant in their Wellingtons and soiled aprons were squatting nearby and having their acrid cigarettes. A whiff of a foul drain hit me for a moment, then mercifully the sensation passed. The fat middle-aged woman selling the genuine sterling silver jewellery gave me her usual beaming smile because I had once bought a knick-knack from her a year ago, or perhaps she was just naturally friendly. Old Mr. Sung's shop had closed already, or had, with greater likelihood, not opened that day. Mr. Sung only seemed to open on rent collection days, when he received tribute from all his tenants. Scattered around the market in various decrepit tenements. I made my way down the alley at the side of the building. At the end I could just discern the sign for the Italian-style trattoria, where I had once eaten a pizza made with short-crust pastry. The alley was dark, shaded, and the air was still. I knew Mr. Sung lived above his shop, like many people in the market. He lived alone. His wife had died a year into my first tenancy, and I still remembered the white-garbed crowd at the funeral and the huge wreaths on wooden props. I rang the bell. The rickety metal grille protecting the doorway was open. Sung was half deaf, I knew, so I first hammered on the door, then pushed it lightly. It opened slowly, grinding a little on its hinges. The staircase was just as musty and dusty as my own. I made my way up it and came to the doorway of his flat, which was festooned with red and gold banners bearing the usual Chinese characters for good luck and prosperity. No bell button was to be seen, so I hammered on the door, more impudently perhaps than I needed to. No answer. I tried the handle. It turned, and I pushed the door open. It gave a foot or two at first, then it caught on something very heavy, which yielded slowly, then shifted a little. I put my neck around the door and looked into the still entrance alcove. The light from the bare bulb above was still on, and my breath stole away from me a moment as I saw what had hindered the door's progress. He lay just the way people lie when they suddenly become inanimate objects rather than living beings curled up for righteous slumber. There's never any beauty in it. One arm lay under him, and his head was twisted towards the other side. His thick spectacles were cracked and lay on the other side of him, a foot away from where his face was now looking with a calm, slightly puzzled stare. The other arm lay lifeless, cupped, palm upwards, frozen in a gesture of strange supplication. I put a hand to his neck. It was as cold as boarding-house soup. No wound was visible except a small cut on the side of his head. It had not bled much. He might well have been dead before he fell. The door of the cramped living room was open, and I walked in. There was no sign of any unusual disorder. Mr. Sung lived in a kind of easy disarray most of the time, in any case, I was sure. The plastic bags suspended on bamboo poles along the ceiling were bulging, dry and dusty. The long wooden sofa was covered with newspapers and a solitary aged silk cushion. The grimy cream curtains were drawn closed and fluttered a little at a half-opened window. The only odd thing I noticed was a large, dead, unplucked chicken on the glass-topped coffee table. It smelt of nothing much at all. There were no dirty dishes in the kitchen, and the bathroom towels were clean and dry. I found a packet of tissues in my jacket pocket and rubbed the door handles clean. I then rubbed around Mr. Sung's waxy neck just to make sure. I closed the door again, and the tissue still in my hand, and stepped down the staircase with a gentle, slow, deliberate tread. I wiped the street door clean, the doorbell button clean, and closed the door again, holding the handle with the same tissue. The alley was still empty. I walked towards the Italian restaurant. It was closed. I feigned interest in the menu in the window for a moment. My heart was thumping. My mind was racing, but at the edge of all that, I was growing numb and shaky all over, and my legs were becoming as heavy as broken hearts. I turned past the small war memorial, the study room, the small empty clinic. I waved vaguely to the Indians at the Kerry Tiffin restaurant. Then I walked past the Thai restaurant again, sidled down the alley, and trudged up the stairs to my flat. The stalls on the way were all a blur. I sat down on my blue leather sofa a moment, but it offered no comfort. Was it a set-up, or did stumbling on corpses come with the territory of private detectives, malgré lui? It sounded good in fiction, but in reality, discovering someone taking the big sleep wasn't all that thrilling. Death was ugly, disgusting, even tragic sometimes, but then it became grimly tedious and irksome, as the prospect approached of explaining matters in exact detail, slowly and deliberately, to a series of drab policemen in shabby Hong Kong police stations again and again, in triplicate. I had done enough of that already. 3 or 4 suicides, a drowning, a car smash, an accidental drug overdose, and 2 murder scenes ought to be enough for any private dick's sorry lifetime, but it never is. Death never quite goes out of fashion. Then my mind came up with something else. I was the intended victim. I was being set up. But if it was all aimed at me, who wanted me out? Get a grip, Telford. Get a plan. I shut down my laptop on the desk and put it in its little carry bag. Then I walked down the stairs again and took a turn left, down the old stone steps tourists like to photograph for some reason. Then I took a sharp right and strode past Elephants, past the parked vans, the silk shops, the postcard stands, and the mini luggage emporium, and at last arrived at Watson's the chemist's. Then I almost leapt up the steps to that little municipal sitting-out area, as they describe it, where you couldn't smoke, but you could loiter and stare and think up your next move, if there was one. I turned on my laptop and it jolted into action from its deep electronic sleep. I switched on the wireless, and surely enough, it found the unsecured Wi-Fi connection which broadcasts all over Stanley Village Road. I was into Internet Explorer and on the Hong Kong Police website in an instant. The Hong Kong Police Force likes you to contact them. They have a whole list of forms you can use online for that very purpose. There's a complaint of vehicle obstruction form, 2 lost property forms, and 2 access to data forms. There's one form for complaining about unjust issue of parking tickets and another one for reporting a telephone nuisance. You can even make a complaint about the police themselves if you have a lot of time on your hands and you're a truly concerned citizen, or simply have a more than usually bloody mind. There's no form for reporting dead landlords. Right at the bottom of the web page, though, there's a link marked General Inquiries. Click on that and your computer warnings swing into action and tell you all about suspect certificates and hostile cookies. Press on regardless, Telford. The police in Hong Kong seem to expect a lot for just an inquiry, things like where you live and your ID card number and all your telephones. I next went into that handy little translator site where you transform basic English into basic just about anything. Urgent. I'm a friend of Mr. Sung, who lives at 198 Stanley Main Street, Hong Kong Island, above his shop at the same address. I have not seen him for many days, and I cannot contact him by telephone. I am worried. He is an old man and he lives alone. Can you send an officer and see he is okay? Thank you very much. I translated all that and pasted it into the form. I invented a likely name and a likely address somewhere in Kwun Tong. I clicked on the button and it was gone. Then my telephone rang. It was Larry. I banked the cheque. The retainer is just what we need. The management office is beginning to get jumpy. Don't worry. Mrs. Chow probably owns the building. What gives? Well, our little party has a somewhat colourful past for all her 25 years. Not that she's tried to break into films and music, but they seem to have broken into her. Quite a few glossy magazine pics with minor entertainment mobsters, so perhaps she doesn't say no all the time. It's the butter not melting in the mouth look. Gets the guys all the time. Are we going to get hold of all the email, you think? I can try. There are ways. I just don't believe the baloney we've been handed. Neither do you, I suspect. Always best to stick to the facts. We know nothing, really. Did you find our car? Not exactly. Meaning? I'll let you know about that in the fullness of time. Don't you go devious on me. I get enough of that already. He hung up just as I was about to say something about my present predicament. He has a way of doing things like that. This time I was actually grateful. There were 2 good places to park a Lancia in Stanley, but perhaps Adeline chose a bad place. I had a vague memory of spotting something unusual and flashy on one of my rare jogs just in front of the clinic, along by the playground, and I made my way there before the boys in green decided to tow it away. That manoeuvre usually took them 2 weeks to organise, but you never know. The car was still there, a cute red number which had money and the big me written all over it. There are ways of inconspicuously breaking into a car in broad daylight, but I only know one. Larry's set of 6 picklocks were valuable at such times. He once spent a whole evening going down the parked cars of a side street in Wan Chai, demonstrating how to use them. But he'd left the one that could open a Lancia out of the pack. So it seemed anyway, or perhaps I hadn't been paying enough attention that evening in Wan Chai. There was nothing to be seen much in the front or back seats except for the usual Hello Kitty cushions. I made my way to the boot and fiddled with it for a moment. Perhaps Italian cars are all the same. Perhaps they aren't. They can't be that difficult to break into. Italy is the only country I ever saw where car owners walk around with their car radios in their hands. I was on my 3rd picklock in the ring and about to sidle away when the boot suddenly lurched and sprang open. I looked around. The boot was almost empty, not even a spare tyre. Then I saw the bag, a neat little leather hold-all. I picked it up. It wasn't very heavy. A quick wipe all round with the tissues. Nothing suspicious about being seen doing that. Lancia owners are such clean people. I walked past the Sung house, but it was still the same as before. No law anywhere, no blue and white tape, no flashing lights, no coming and going. Bodies in Hong Kong are usually found by their smell. No one hears the blows. Call me sentimental, but I felt a little concerned for Mr. Sung's corpse. I didn't want it to start to putrefy. He was quite a rich man, and they stink the worst, they say. Outside my block, the little man was reading something. He did that sometimes. Aberrant behaviour. The surprise which doesn't surprise at all. He didn't look up. Some of the stall staff gave my bag a glance. Now I looked at it, it seemed to be more than just a little she, not a Trelford bag at all. But perhaps I was going up in the world. Even clapped-out expats can be on a roll. Upstairs I opened the bag, this time wearing the rubber gloves with 100 legitimate uses in home and office. Every Hong Kong girl wants a Gucci bag, but a copy will do. It shows willing. This was no copy. It contained all the things the modern girl needs, but which she doesn't necessarily want to haul around in her handbag. There were a couple of books on political theory, a hand mirror, a pair of silk pyjamas, a hairbrush, a battery of expensive makeup, a few sanitary towels, a folder of photos, a high-resolution digital camera without a data card, and 1 pair of silk slippers. There was even an electric toothbrush and a small brown cuddly bear, which had clearly taken a lot of cuddling. All in all, the kind of outfit a girl might compile if she was going to leave town for a few days. Or the kind of stuff some girls carried around with them all the time. I looked at the camera again. I turned it on. It had nothing in the memory, nothing I could see anyway, but Larry might have a way of finding what had been taken recently. The photos were the usual collection of harmless-looking shots of the well-travelled and well-connected Hong Kong girl. Adeline in front of the White House, Adeline in front of a university, Adeline on a plane, and Adeline in Lan Kwai Fong sipping a cocktail. Then there were shots of Adeline with gorgeous, pouting girlfriends, or skinny-looking, frowning young men in expensive suits. No one in particular seemed to crop up more regularly than anyone else, but one of them I recognised straight off. It was none other than Mr. Sung's tall, shiny, and somewhat incompetent son, the boy who had gone to great lengths to impress the judge at the Lands Tribunal that time with his knowledge of the law I had rung rings round him. The sleuth in me felt along the lining of the bag no lumps or apparent irregularities. It was a beautiful lining, and all the little pockets contained hardly anything but dust and fragments of wrapping. I looked through the makeup bag again. The little pots and tubes and lipsticks all looked new and unused. Strange. There were also a number of face whitening bottles with names I recognised from the IFC Mall. I held them against a light and squeezed them all over gently, but nothing showed inside. Then I opened the lipstick and the mascara, the face powder, and looked inside the top of the eyelining pencil. Then I saw it. It could have gotten there by accident, but I didn't think so. Those tiny flash data chips were getting cheaper these days, but they weren't yet throwaway items. I kept mine in a little plastic box in my man bag. Putting one under the face powder pad was an obvious place for a detective, but most people aren't detectives. I blew away the dust around it and reached into my bag for the USB adapter. The images flashed up on my laptop screen in an instant. There was the same collection of college gal memorabilia, but young Mr. Sung was definitely in the foreground this time and seemed to be having quite a lot of fun. There were a lot of pictures of Stanley too, and some of them seemed to be taken from within the Kai Fong building. I recognised the old lady district councillor, the one who seemed far too chummy with the Stanley grandees. I also saw that a number of documents had been photographed, some of them several times, just to make sure. Wherever Adeline was, she did at least know how to leave clues.